Hello and welcome to the Nash Tackle Off the Hook podcast. Just to make you aware, this podcast may contain some explicit/offensive language, and if that's not your thing, you don't have to listen, but I have given you a warning. I hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
You don't know the half of it, but anyway. I'm skating on the thinnest ice known to man.
He said, and they put a poison in the tank that just instantly kills them. He went and we've run out of it, so we cut their heads off with shovels.
Suddenly, bang! The whole boat exploded.
Take your sort of 8-inch long piranha and imagine that at 4, 5, maybe 6 feet.
I said, I've revived your dead fish. F off, he said. You haven't.
That was just humongous. It was... I couldn't believe what I was looking at.
I'm just battling this fish out, and I know it's a black man. I'm saying I'll never be a naughty boy again.
If you catch fish and you return them to the water, then you are my brother.
Hello and welcome to the Nash Tackle Off the Hook podcast. Today's guest, long-term Nash family stalwart, I'm going to call him, top angler, and one of the nicest, most giving back of anglers I think I know. A piece of carp fishing history is none other than Julian Cundiff. Julian, how are you, mate?
I'm very well, actually. Yeah. It all sounds very nice, that. And I'm actually glad I bumped into Kev in the office, because it's actually somebody who's actually older than me. I walked in the office and thought, got a load of YTS trainees in here. I thought, they're somewhere between 17 and 40. And then Kev came and I thought, Kev's at least 6 years older than me, maybe 7. So I felt okay about it.
You're not that old, mate.
59 coming up, mate. 59, yeah. So, yeah, Nash Association goes back to 89. So, obviously I knew Kev before that, but 89 was the first help he gave me. So what we're talking, 33 years. So many of your listeners will be going, 89? When was that? It was like when Christopher Columbus came across. And I know, it's honestly, there was carp fishing in 89.
Slightly after that.
Yeah.
For you recently, what you been up to? Fishing?
Fishing, yeah. There's no downside to retirement. Fishing, bike riding. I won't say. Usually it was like fishing, bike riding, going to gigs, but obviously the big C word has closed off gigs. So mainly fishing, bike riding, seeing friends, catching up, writing, just enjoying life.
The old bike riding's not been too great.
No, yeah. I mean, bike ride about 2,000 miles a year. And touch wood, if there is any here, touch wood, I've always been pretty safe. I've had one accident when I fell off myself, but I got knocked off 19th of September, an old boy, and he was 71. Kev's age, no, not Kev's age, a bit younger than Kev. No, I'm joking, Kev. He drove into the back of me at a low speed, knocked me off my bike. It could happen to anybody. I mean, my poor old dad, God bless him, he used to, he'd come to my house or I'd go and see him and there'd be scrapes on his car. And he used to say, Dad, these scrapes on the car. And he always used to say, oh, yeah, somebody cut me up. And I used to think, how many people has my dad collided with? And he was 71, so he was very apologetic. There's a little bit of damage to the bike. I did a little fracture on my knee, bit of concussion, and I burst the bursa sac on my elbow. So at my age, it's the first swelling that just won't go down.
Yeah. Mate, but you're still on it, mate, aren't you? Straight back on it. You've been good.
I went fishing. I think I got knocked off the Saturday, and I was fishing again on the Thursday. I had a couple of 20s on the Thursday. It's you just do it, don't you? Yeah.
Yeah, fair play. There's loads to talk about, as ever. An unbelievable sort of history. When we were planning this, there was like 75 pods we could probably record. What I wanted to talk about, or where I wanted to start, apart from the title "Sexiest Man in Carp Fishing," which I think is probably the best, there's been no others since. So
I am the reigning champion.
You are the reigning.
I am the reigning and undefeated.
Take that to the
since
bank.
1994. So. What is that? We're talking like nearly 30 years.
Oh, yeah, that's not bad for a 59-year-old, mate.
My competition was Des Taylor, though. Fair. Sorry, Des, if you're listening, mate, but it was a very small pool in those days. I'd have to hand the title over to you now.
No, mate, that's definitely not my title at all. But where I wanted to start is the nickname, apart from Sexiest Man, as I said, the Selby Flyer. Oh, what a nickname that is. Talk to me about you, how that nickname became synonymous with you and the angling at that time.
Well, I was just Julian, I was just Julian, or I think sometimes my friends used to call me C, obviously, because if your last name was Peter or whatever, use that. And when I first met Tim, that would be probably about 1986, and it was in the era of nicknames. So everybody had nicknames in those days. So I think Tim's friend, Greg Fletcher, because he didn't like to spend money, was called Deep Pockets. Tim was the Man in Black. So in those days, everybody had nicknames. And when Tim met me, because I was this young Keenie, still I'm a Keenie. I'm an older Keenie now. Because I was this Keenie who was doing 1,001 things at once. His first title was I was a Selby shooting star. Bearing in mind, I didn't come from Selby. I came from Campbellsford, which was a little village near Selby. But the Campbellsford Flyer doesn't really. I think Selby, the York Flyer might have been better. But so Tim called me the Selby shooting star, and then I think he said you were going places, you were flying high, and it got shortened to Selby Flyer. And I don't know when that ended up finishing off. I think. I think probably the 90s, I became known as Jules, and I've always been known as Jules since then. But the Selby Flyer, Selby Shooting Star, and probably a few other nicknames I was given, Rent-A-Gob and stuff like that. That was definitely in the 80s with Tim.
I love that. Talk to me about the angling at that time, because obviously you are a northern boy through and through.
Yeah.
What was the scene like in those years as you were coming through?
I started. We're not going to do the usual. My course fishing went back to 1976. My specialist angling started in 79 and 80, and probably early 80s. And it just shows how naive we were. We fished a water called Drax Pond. And I was so naive that we used to see these fish in the shallows, and I used to think, wow, they are record tench. And of course, they were. This was in the days before polarized sunglasses and things like that. And actually, they were carp. And I caught a few small carp, but they were just another specialist fish. So an 8-pound carp or a 6-pound tench, it was a specialist fish. I caught my first double, I think it was about 83, 84. And it was just like, wow. And I was sort of taken by that. But carp fishing in those days, there was very little written about it. Carp fishing was just as simply, there was bream fishing, there was tench fishing, there was rudd fishing, there was pike fishing, there was eel fishing, there was carp fishing. Carp fishing, despite what people may say or think now, it was just another facet of angling. It was seen as something you moved into when you got a bit older, and you didn't want so many bites, and it was something you graduated into. Sort of like, having an old car. So it's something you graduated into. So it was just something I knew one day I would probably do. And I remember walking around the pond one day, and there was a couple of guys fishing. I thought, wow, it was the first time I'd seen a brolly with sides. Mm-hmm. And they got 2 buzzers, they got 2 rods, and everything was neat. And I've been a bit of an OCD freak. And I looked at these guys and thought, wow, that looks really... And they tried to tell me the real fishing and things like that. But you know what you're like as a kid, you pester people, don't you? And in the end, they sort of gave up and didn't want to talk to me, but they gave me a copy of The Carp Strikes Back by Rod Hutchinson. Now, I read that, and it was like a boy's own adventure. And all of a sudden, carp fishing clicked to me. I mean, my carp fishing was never going to be like that, never has been like that, but it was like Famous Five, Enid Black. It enthralled me. And from there on, I was just like taken by carp fishing. I mean, I've been a writer before that, because I was crap at school. I was absolutely, I was terrible. I was at a grammar school. I was one of the, I wouldn't say underachievers, but my parents said, you do what you're interested in, and I like writing, I like reading. The rest of it didn't interest me. I had no intention of going to university and stuff like that. I wanted to be a water bailiff. I love my fishing. And so in those days, there was only one job in fishing. It was a water bailiff. There was no other jobs. There was no, there was no colleges and things like that. And so I wasn't really bothered, but, I got interested in fishing. I used to write about perch fishing, pike fishing. I wrote for the NESG mags. I wrote for Pike Lines. I wrote things like that. And when I started carp fishing, it just seemed natural to write about carp fishing, because I find writing very, very easy. Obviously, it takes time, but I found it easy. So I wrote about carp fishing, sent it to Tim, And he wrote me back this handwritten letter, which I've still got. And it in effect said, that's really good, but perhaps rather than like 92 pictures of yourself, could we have a scenic as well? You know, when you're young, it's like, here's another picture of me with a carp and another and another. And it's like, very nice, but maybe a scenic or a picture of a rig. And I sort of sent it back to him, and we built up this correspondence. And Tim was one of those people who's, and I know he talked about it on his podcast and said we'd have made it even without him, but that's easy to say. But I would say that Tim had got a good eye for giving people the ball, like Simon Crowe, Rob Hughes, me, Briggsy, people like that. And he gave us the ball and we didn't drop it. And so, you know, that's where my carp fishing started. And it was, you know, really in the north, Tilery motorway, Drax, Three Lakes, all those northern waters, sort of 84 to the 90s. So that's where my fishing was.
That's pretty infamous in terms of waters that you've just named there as a collective. Yeah. Talk to me about, we've spoke a fair bit with Brian around Tilery, but we haven't talked about Drax too much. Talk to me about the fishing around that area and specifically Drax. I know you did a fair bit on there. That was
it was really funny that Drax was the first water. I didn't even know what fishing was, to be quite honest. And that was the water I saw the old man tench fishing. That old man was probably younger than I am now. So it's like, wow, there's this old guy there. He's definitely over 40. Now, I was so lucky. I dropped on this water, Drax, that was like a specimen angler's dream. So in 76, it was doing pike to mid-20s. It was doing tench to £7. And it had been stocked with a few carp. And obviously, as I moved through, I was never a carp angler until the 80s. But what had happened is in those days, a lot of people, carp being moved between waters was not unknown. It was wrong, but it wasn't unknown. And I know a lot of local lads had stocked carp into Drax. And all of a sudden, this water that was very fertile, rich, all of a sudden, these carp went from like £9 to 14 to 20 to 30. So Drax was a water that, so I had just looked onto the best tench water, the best bream water, the best pike water, the best eel water, and then a great carp water. So 3 miles from my home. So I didn't have a car, so my dad would run my fishing tackle down. I'd cycle there. You know, my mum ruled the roost. So my dad, I mean, this is how different, you couldn't do it nowadays. My dad would run my fishing tackle from home. He would leave it at the pond, just at the gates, literally. I would cycle 3 miles. It would never be stolen. It'd still be there.
Yeah. Yeah, times.
And then when I finished, I would leave my tackle at the pond 3 miles from home. I would cycle home. Dad would then go and get it. I mean, you know, I can't imagine doing that at Linear, Norton, anywhere. And that's no disrespect to them, but it was a different world.
Yeah.
So that's where my
Fair play mum and dad as well.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Throughout everyone's, I think, journey, they're a pretty integral part. You need that support system, don't you?
My dad was, I lost my dad and he was my role model. And I never forget. And when you look back, you realise what a great dad you had. And he used to say to me, before I got the art of self-timers sorted properly, he had retired in his 50s. Now, this would be the mid-90s to late 90s. And he used to say, because I got my first mobile phone, the great big bricks, and he would say, if you get a good one that wants photographing, just ring home. So this would, so I'd catch in the night, leave it in the sack and all that, as we used to do. And landing net, I used to at least in the landing net, and then ring me at 6:45. He says, I'll know it's you. Ring 3 times, and then call off. And so if the phone rang 3 times, it wouldn't wake my mother up. My dad got up early. He'd drive down to the pond, he'd photograph the fish, and then go and have his breakfast.
Cool.
So every time I've driven my dad all around the country to military museums and whatever, I've never ever thought, you know what, this is a hard day, because my dad did 10 times and my mum what I ever gave back to them.
Bless him. We talked about you glossed over a sort of Tim and your association sending in a piece of writing. Talk to me about specifically around the age that you submitted that piece of writing and how you sort of got more involved, because when you take that step to, especially at a time when there wasn't much writing available, to publish some of your work and you go to Tim Paisley, who even back then it's influential, that's a big step.
Well, it was in the days of when addresses were known, and I can tell you his address now. I've got this. I was never good at school, but I taught myself like a memory bank, so I can, read, remember. But it doesn't allow you to see out the box mainly because you can, can recite stuff, but you can't think outside the box. So Tim was 217 Cemetery Road, Sheffield. So that was his address. And his address was there, anybody for submission. So I wrote the letter off, as I was, I said, they sent the pictures. We conversed a bit, and he obviously knew I'd got this big interest in the history of carp fishing. I loved the history. Carp fishing to me has never just been about catching them. It's about who went before me, who's going after me, the history of it, the personalities. I would go to slideshows, we'd say hello and things like that. And he obviously knew that I was keen on writing. I was fairly good with the written word. And he said, you'll have to come and see me in Sheffield and we'll do some work. And I remember I caught I didn't have a car. No, I think I just got, I may not have got a moped or a motorbike. I hadn't got a car yet. Terribly, I used to pick girlfriends who got cars. Which is an awful thing to say.
That's an edge. When you're the sexiest man in carp fishing, mate, you can do what
not
you
in
want.
86. I wasn't the sexiest man in carp fishing. It was like, which girl's got a car? But they didn't tend to last long because you would say to them, by the way, I go fishing on Friday, I come home Sunday, and in the week, I really don't go out as well. So you didn't tend to have many girlfriends who lasted a long time. So caught the train to Sheffield, caught the taxi up to Cemetery Road, met Tim in his house, and, it was Spartan days in those days for Tim, and Tim talked about it. I'm telling you, when I went in his house, it was like, I thought, his flat. I thought, wow, I was expecting some publishing magnates thing, but it was very Spartan because Tim had put it all on the line, and that's what Tim did. Tim was a man of vision, and he was prepared to take chances, and there was nothing in that. I remember going and thinking, wow, there's some Rivitas here and there's some bait ingredients and there's a few writing pads and a few books, but there wasn't a lot else. And we spent time at the flat and we'd talk about writers and he'd give me jobs to do. He'd give me names and addresses to write to. And in those days, you would write to them, you'd get telephone numbers, you'd ring. You knew the ones that would write back, you knew the ones you had to ring. And it built up like that. And I'll never forget that I think it was the second time I went to Tim's. And we worked till about midnight. In those days, stuff would be typed up, it'd be laid on a bit of paper. And then we'd put a picture in 5" by 4". And we did all that. And I started like 12 o'clock and I went to sleep. And about 5 o'clock in the morning, all of a sudden the lights come on. I'm like, oh, what's that? As Tim said, he's inspired to write. I'm like, mate, you might be inspired to write at 5 in the morning, but I'm absolutely knackered. But like Tim's right, crack on with it, Jules. And, he taught me a brilliant work ethic. So my friendship with Tim developed over there. If he wanted something doing, he knew he could depend on me. And obviously that then grew into writing most issues for Carp Fisher, which was quarterly. Then it became bi-monthly. And then Carp World, he asked me to write for Carp World. So I appeared in the first issue of a Carp World. And I'm sort of proud that I'm the first article in the first issue ever of Carp World, which was, something. So that's how my friendship developed with Tim. I wasn't the only one, and I think back, there's a lot of people in those days who he was friends with, but, for all of us that give him the ball, a lot of people drop it, but that happens in all, Tim was a hard taskmaster. He expected stuff done and it was done. And, that was a great lesson in life, the people I associate with Kev is a good role model. He works hard, but he expects his staff to do exactly the same. And sometimes having a boss who is very hard worker is also, it teaches you a lot, but also it means there's no slacking because you have to live up to him. So Tim was very like that, a great role model. And he was the one that taught me you answer everything. So if somebody sends you a letter, either it's good enough or it's not good enough, you write back. If somebody sends you an article, it's good enough. I don't care whether the Joe blogs or whether the Rod Hutchinson, you acknowledge it and you say thank you. And that's, Tim taught me that good work ethic, which I've still got today. So even now, if somebody sends me something, I'll always reply. I don't matter whether they're unknown or I'll always say thank you, because that's the way I was brought up.
Yeah, definitely. You can see that even now on social media, like you say, you're very active and very conscientious with it all. You talked there a little bit about Rod Hutchinson, other characters around the time, and we're talking about absolute founding fathers you were conversing with, dealing with, taking articles from, because you ended up as co-editor of Carp Fisher. So you're dealing with people. How were your interactions with them? What was it like?
To be honest, it was really. I remember going to meet Andy Little. This was one of my gods. This was the guy I'd read about in the CAA magazines, I'd seen in Angler's Mail, meeting Rod Hutchinson, meeting Richie McDonald. And it didn't take too long before you realised, as long as you were, I wasn't mates with them, because you have to, I'm not saying they're better than me, but I think sometimes you have to accept when you meet a person that they've maybe got more, they've achieved more, which doesn't mean they're better than you, but sometimes they deserve a little bit of respect. And I think they understood that I was prepared to, although I would work with them, I understood my position in the hierarchy, and I don't mean that in a disrespectful thing. And I think they liked the fact that although I worked hard, I also respected them for what they'd done. So I wasn't, mate, you know, and there was that, I built up that trust between us. And so, you know, I would like to think that all of the famous anglers I met, I learned something from all of them, which I passed on to other people. So when people meet me, I would think, and I've always said that when people go away having met me, they'll always go away and think, oh, he could be my best friend, he is. You know, and that's what I've done. I mean, people like Richie, and funny if I'm going to see Richie on Friday, the funniest story with Richie, and I have to tell this, and I will shorten it and give you a version that could actually be said on the podcast. Richie was not a writer, so Richie was a phone call. So I was living at home with mum and dad, and with Richie, it was the phone call. So I'd ring him, and I'd leave a message, and I can't remember whether, I don't think it was, maybe it was somebody was there. So I left a message, says, "Hi Richie, it's Jules. I just want to know what your views are on the Sprite hooks or the Orlean door hooks. Just give us a ring. I'll write a few words down." And what used to get a few sentences from him, you used to gloss it up a bit, but you didn't add anything, you just made it more readable. Living at home with mum and dad, I'm upstairs in the bedroom, the phone rings downstairs, my dad answers the phone and he's like, yes. Oh, no. What the hell's that? And the phone went down, and then I went down for a coffee about half an hour later. I said, "Oh, who was that, Dad?" He says, "Well, I've just had a bloke on the phone swearing at me." I went, "Who was that?" He says, "Well, he was this Londony guy." He said, "Hello, Jules." And I said, "No, it's Peter, his father." Well, me and my dad sounded exactly the same on the phone. And Richie went, well, I won't say the words he said to my father. He obviously thought I was taking the you-know-what. And so he took the you-know-what back to my dad. Yeah, you know, to my dad. My dad's like, I'm sorry. And, of course, I had to ring Richie back, and it was a genuine mistake. He thought I was playing and pretending. Yeah, so, but I built up a friendship with all of them. They were all characters. I'm always careful to say nowadays, have we got those characters? We probably have, but in a different way. The stuff we wrote in the 80s and 90s, you could not write now.
No.
And it is really sad, because people complain about, you know, the writings of Hutchie, Malin and stuff like that. And Tim, you can't write in that way nowadays. You know, you could not write those things. You cannot go back. The Carp's, you know, some of Rod's writings probably couldn't come out now, how they were written, you know, calling people no legs and raving alcoholics and spliffs and all that. We've moved on, rightly or wrongly. So, but they were proper characters.
Characters is a very apt description of them. Through this course of time, obviously, we've gone down the writing path slightly, and there's more of that to sort of come, because that has always been a passion consistently through the course of your career, if you like, in angling. We got to a point, you said, I wasn't very good at school, but I've got a memory. And then if I fast forward your sort of life course, you end up in the courts, working in law. Yeah. Now, somebody working in law has obviously got a pretty good sense of, I don't know, education, literacy, being able to organise themselves, and things you'd expect to sort of be synonymous with education. Talk to me about how Julian found himself in a legal capacity and how that married up with your fishing.
Purely by fluke. I was at school. I wasn't one of the big achievers. And I'd got no intention I'd no more intention to work in the court than I had to be an astronaut. A job came up, you know, you had the careers evening. So I went to the careers evening. It's like, you know, my dad says, you're going to have to get a job. He says, because there's going to be a recession. And if you're 2 or 3 years behind with your studies, etc., you're not going to. So I thought, I'll just get any job. And there was this advertisement. Well, there was this woman who looked absolutely bored stiff at the careers evening. Have a job at court. She was obviously getting a day off in lieu for, you know, sit there. And I was like, you know, I was probably in those days on about £5 a week pocket money and stuff like that. And I looked at the salary, and I think it was about £5,000 or something. And I thought, £5,000? Like, £5,000 was like, Well, £10 a week times 52 weeks is 520. That's like a tenfold increase. And it's like, so I said to this, well, what's the job? She said, well, it's just admin in the office, paper filing. You'll just be working in an office of like 6 or 8 girls. I'm thinking, $5,000 a year, working in an office with girls, and it's like 4 miles from home. Like, I'm your man.
Sold.
Yeah. So 3 of us went for the interview. It was, people nowadays it was one of those interviews where it was like you were judged more on who you were and your parents than any ability. I talked about my dad, my mum was like this and whatever. And they literally appointed me on the spot. They went downstairs, the other 2, you haven't got the job, he's got the job, You're an admin assistant. So just worked in the court doing admin, filing paper. And you got to see people who paid the fines. You got to understand maintenance money. You got to sit in court and see how the boss did things. And I'd got probably no long-term aspirations. Then I got a phone call from the boss that said, we think you could go far. Obviously showed a bit of it. So I want you to go and do your A-level law. So I went and did the A-level law on, in the evenings. I passed my law eventually. I thought that's quite interesting because it's quite technical and you didn't have to be a fluid thinker. You could learn the law quite easily. And then I was sent to do my diploma in law, which was at Manchester Polytechnic. And that was, in those days, they pay for everything. They pay for your books.
Yeah.
They pay for your lodging. They pay for your travel. They pay for your hotel. They gave you £80 out-of-pocket expenses. What a record collection I got over 3 years. Going to Manchester, you know what it's like working at Poly, going to Poly. You have like maybe 2 hours on a Monday, 4 hours on a Wednesday, nothing on it. And it was like, I must have, those record shops, all my mates who were on the course, we like music, rock music those days. We were just going on the record shops buying records out of pocket expenses.
80 quid spend.
Yeah, which was a lot of money in those days. Yeah. I passed my law exams and it was that thing where being that the legal advisor in court was very much a people thing. And I found it very easy to be to interact with people. And it just came naturally. So I got the interaction with the fishing people, interaction with people in court. It was just a natural thing that came on, and I was there from 1980 to 2018.
Jeez,
so 38 years.
You must have enjoyed it.
Absolutely loved it.
How did you balance the two? How did you balance as active as you were fishing and a high-profile, very busy lifestyle working in law and court?
Oh, well, that was actually quite... To start with, it was okay because, when I was in the admin, it was 9 to 5, go fishing afterwards. Then all of a sudden, you've got a bit more of a... So it was never a case of going fishing from work. You always had to go... Well, you would go home, get changed and go... But in the morning, you had to wash your hair and things like that. You just couldn't turn up without a shave and sit in court and things like that. It was very difficult because, first of all, most of the legal advisors were sort of quite one-dimensional. I was a bit different. So this guy fishes all night and goes to work, and there was a bit of, how can you do that and do your job?
Yeah.
But that sort of settled down because people realised I could do it. So I could exist on 2 or 3 hours of sleep and still do my job. It became difficult because the more you'd caught your local fish, the more you had to fish further afield. And it became, so the better you become at anything. So instead of just being the legal advisor at Selby, you became the legal advisor at York. Then you became the legal advisor at Harrogate. Then you had to go to Scarborough. And instead of just catching local fish, you needed to move. You had to fish an hour each way. So you almost became a victim of your own success. But I always remember Tim's work rate. Tim, an incredible work rate. So I thought, well, I could do it. I can work full time and go fishing, doing overnighters. Cost me a lot of relationships. It probably meant I was a bit insular in certain areas, but I lived at home with mum and dad till I was 33, which was a real bonus.
That's a result, isn't it?
When I left home at 33, and I left home at 33, I was still paying £40 a month board. In 1996. That was a result.
That is brilliant, isn't it?
So that helped me save towards the first house. And I remember, we took mum and dad to look at the first house, which was a fairly big property in the country. My dad looked at it and went, I've paid for that.
Exactly. I looked at it, the West Wing and the East Wing.
Like, they've got a bigger house than us as a first house. But, that was my parents. But my parents and Tim taught me that work rate. Nobody else was going to do it.
No.
I see loads of people, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. I see people who burn out in the fishing industry. And I think, mate, all you've done is work in the fishing industry. You've not had a job and go fishing, because you get people work in the fishing industry and then say, oh, I don't go fishing anymore. I'm like thinking, I worked, I went fishing just as much, and I worked in the fishing industry as well. It's all about work rate. But that's the people who took, that's the Kevs, that's the Andy Littles, that's the Tim Paisleys, that's the Eric. All these people taught me work rate.
You can teach somebody work rate, but the realities of actually doing it and living that life are different.
Absolutely.
Massive. And you said there, you sort of said that there was sacrifices that were made with regards to other things, but in reality, they're big sacrifices, especially at that age when you've got a decent job, you've got a decent salary coming in, and there's parties, women, music.
Yeah, those went by. Literally there were. You had to decide what was more important. You can't do everything, and you have to decide. What is important. Your health. My job was always the most important. If I was brought up in a way where your job came first. Whatever the boss said, you did it. So if he said jump, you jumped. And then the fishing was the same. If Tim tells me I need Rod Hutchinson stuff done, it got done. It wasn't, well, I'll get it done next week. So you learn a work ethos, and that is the way to succeed. But things were sacrificed. Yeah, I didn't see a lot of my mates. It was all about fishing. It was all about work. It was, I love motorbikes. I didn't get on the motorbikes as much. Didn't see as many people as I wanted. But I don't view it as sacrifices, because you don't miss what you haven't had.
Yeah. I see.
I know what I had, but I don't. All my mates, my mates have been married 3 times. So I don't miss those things. So no, although there were sacrifices, but I don't view them as sacrifices. It was just work rate.
Yeah. Talk to me about your overnighters.
Yeah. The thing with overnighters as well, and it's only now that I've retired that you realise that timing is everything. And you realise that when you're just doing overnighters for overnighters' sake, if the fish are feeding 7 till 11 a.m., you can do, I was about to say you can do 8 overnighters a week, but you can't. You can do 7 overnighters every week. If those fish are feeding 7 till 11, you are wasting your time. When I look back, I often went fishing for fishing's sake. I have to go fishing. I love fishing. I love going. I don't have to catch them. I don't have to catch the most. I don't have to catch the biggest. I just have to go fishing. And I look back and think a lot of times I went fishing in probably from 88, 89 when I started overnighters, so 87, through to probably the late 90s when I was simply going for going's sake, when really I would have been better off going Friday night into Saturday morning, even though it was busy because the feeding spell. But overnighters, they were difficult because you were leaving work at 5, you were getting home 5:30, and then you'd load the stuff in the car, and then you were doing either half an hour or an hour. You weren't getting cast until 7 o'clock. You ain't getting plum choice of swim. I used to, a lot of the waters I had to drive past, and I had to not even look at the water, because if you drive past the water in the morning and there's nobody there, and you drive past at night and there's 9 bivvies, that little thing in your head goes, it's not worth doing, mate. It's not worth doing. So I used to choose a route on the way home or not look, because you could talk yourself out of it. There's 9 bivvies, it's not worth my time. Once you're there, you go. And the problem with the most people is they always find a reason not to go. It's too windy, it's too wet, it's too hot. The big one's been caught. There's 9 bivvies on. It's not fishing. And I taught myself, don't second guess yourself. If you're going to go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you go Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, no matter what, whether it's raining, sunny, there's 12 on, there's 2 on. And I just made myself go. Now, that was good to a certain extent because you were going. But sometimes it was wasted nights, because you'd fish and you'd see fish topping over your swim. You'd hang on till 6:45. Then you had to go and wash the hair, go to work. And you come back and the guy'd say, God, they were all over your swim. A guy dropped in and he had a couple. That's the reality.
Yeah.
You can't have it all the way. And as Tim said to me, you could have jacked your job and you could have caught thousands and thousands more carp, but it was your choice to stay at work. So I don't want anybody to ever feel sorry for me, because it was my choice to work and to fish. And a lot of my mates said, we took our hat off to you. We used to see you pulling into the car park, 9th choice of swim, pissing it down. And then as we woke up in the morning, your car had gone. And again, it just teaches you, it's a life skill. It was hard work. And when they were feeding at night, I could catch them, and I'd do 2, 3, 4 nights in a row. But there were often 2 or 3 or 4 weeks when they weren't feeding at night, and there's nothing you could do about it. It's just a good life lesson.
Mate, there's some discipline there. Imagine, I was just thinking if you had shorter hair, Jules, and you didn't have to wash it in the morning, there's an extra half hour there to bite, mate.
Yeah, well, staying at home at mum and dad's fantastic. I had a bath at home.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, any lads who've got mums, don't leave your mum and dad. Stay at home. The washing's done, the bath's done. It was no, it's wrong to say it was the best years, but they were golden years. It's like, oh, you pack lunch, there's a flask.
And one thing that you said to me as well, which is impressive, because even doing, let's say, 2 nights, when you're doing that sort of job and it's that consistent and there's not really a break in it, it does wear on you. It does wear on you. It's hard work physically, tiredness, etc. But you said to me that you didn't pull the old classic, oh, I'm not feeling very well, I'm not coming in, just for another day's carp fishing or a bit of a rest.
I can honestly say I never did that. Again, there's obviously the way you're brought up by your mum and dad. And there's also that, I tell you what, I bet the day that I sick it off and go fishing, it's the day that my boss rings my mum and says, oh, I'm sorry to hear Julian's ill. Oh, no, he's fishing today. It's... So, yes, a lot of it was the way I've been brought up. But there was also this fear of the one day I have a sickie or whatever, my boss is going to ring up and catch me out. So, no, I can honestly say that I may have had the odd sickie when I wasn't great and I stayed in bed, but I can honestly say I never had a sickie when I went fishing. You know, maybe 50-50 fear and 50-50 moral compass of mum and dad. But yeah, I can honestly say that, yeah. More fool me. But I did see a lot of lads over the years lost jobs who were had good jobs for the power station and were pulling sickies, and my job was always first.
Talk to me about any significant captures over those overnight period. Anything stand out? Any venues? Any significant fish?
I probably, in those years I was fishing locally, so Tilery motorway, 3 Lakes Drax, a radius of travelling up to an hour. So that was leaving home at night at 6:30. So I've made 6, getting there at 7. So it was all about time. And a couple of years in a row, in 93 and 94, I had over 40 20s, literally an overnighters in the 90s.
That's great,
which was took some doing. And I remember I think it was 42 or 43 one year and 45 the next year. But I remember the last year of doing that really taught me a life lesson, because it was all about, I need to catch more. If I catch 45, I've caught the most. And that's what you like when you're a kid. It's, I've caught the most, I've caught the biggest and things like that. And I remember it was in those days of slide films, and you took your pictures, and it was November, and I'd caught 43 20s the year before. And I caught 2 that night, photographed them, put them back, took the slide film into boat, sent it off, got the slide film. And I looked at the pictures of fish and thought, I don't even remember those last 2 fish. I don't even remember. I know I caught them, and I thought, this is ridiculous. They're just becoming objects. I've ceased to be an angler, and I've just objectifying carp. It's 45. So what do I do next year? Catch 47? The year after, 50? And I saw too many people end up blowing themselves out. All of a sudden they were going to get numbers rather than, and I've always enjoyed it for what it is. Yes, you have to catch a few. And yes, I try my hardest. And yes, I do catch a lot of carp, but they're going. And I realised then that was enough. So that 45th 20 was a massive, massive lesson, because it taught me it's not about how many you catch, it's the way you do it. But to be honest, it's really funny. People ask me, what's your favourite carp? And it's going to be my next one, because they're just carp to me. I don't get, that one's more value. I hate that stuff. That one's more value with that because that's older, that's darker, that's a simmer, so it doesn't count. To me, what I got out of the capture is most important, not what anybody else might think about it. And I realised after that 45th one, it's not what other people think about my fishing that I take away with me. It's what I think about it. So I didn't catch 40s and things like that until after 2000. And I remember it did make me laugh. And we'll talk about this with things when you want to take out a carp fishing. I remember this man from down south who ran the quite a few well-known waters, the R&C waters. And he said, you've done well catching all those 20s from Yorkshire, but they're not exactly from Yateley, are they? And I thought, it doesn't make any difference to me. It's a carp. You know, I'm not saying it's more valuable. And I realised then that whatever you caught, somebody would always have a reason to say theirs were more valuable than yours. And so, yes, I've caught lots of carp, and they all have special memories, but the size of them has become irrelevant to me. It truly has.
Yeah, fair. I like that. It's a good outlook. Let's talk Nash. Association with Kev, being involved in Nash. You said 89,
89,
didn't you?
yeah.
How did that all come about?
Obviously, I knew Nashy from the 80s, and I saw him at a few conferences, and he was a different... Well, he probably wasn't a different character then. He would strut round the conferences with his dog, Khan the Doberman, I think it was. You know, he was like... I think he was like Alan Sugar on steroids. Or Donald Trump on steroids. He was like full of pent up, let's have it. But not in a bad way. But Kev was very much like Tim. He gave people opportunities. For all his bluster and he gave people opportunities. I'd obviously caught a lot of fish. I'd used some Nash stuff, not exclusively Nash, but you'd use the bivvies, I'd use the waistlings, things like that. And I got a letter from him saying, you know, I've noticed that you're up and coming, you're doing well. Would you be interested in joining Carp for Daiwa, a Daiwa consultancy, you know, being part of the Daiwa Carp team, along with your Nash stuff. So I joined sort of the Daiwa Carp team as what I call a sticker hander outer at conferences. I was the lowest level. It's like, there's the guy who hands out stickers. You know, I wasn't known then. I was just like, we like him because he gives us stickers and catalogues and ground bait.
Well, stickers are big nowadays.
Yeah, stickers
Jules.
are big, mate. I was well popular. The more stickers you had, the more popular they were. And sort of Kev gave me that association, gave me a bit of discount on tackle. Then I got, I'd get the off free bivvies. So I became sort of a consultant, sponsored in the early 90s. But we were friends always. And I was a consultant through to 94. And in 94, one of the terms of because we're a weekly for Angling Times. And one of the terms for Angling Times was that it was a Fox carp page. And so I spoke to Kev, and Kev was fine about it. Absolutely fine about it. He says, I understand that we're mates. He says, you know, I would never then say, fish that I caught on Fox were actually caught on Nash. So I didn't undo the past. This is what I used. It was I had a 3 or 4 year deal with Fox because that came with the territory, and it was great. It was great. Me and Kev still stayed friends. We, the Christmas cards, we'd meet up, and it taught me that real people don't just ditch you, and you don't ditch real people. So just because my friends use Corda or Ridge Monkey doesn't mean they're not my friends anymore.
No,
and Kev, I've been let go by Kev in relation to certain things. I didn't fall out with him. I thought you made the wrong decision, mate, because these other people were coming through. And I thought, well, he ain't going to be here long, Kev, because I know he's going to go to the next one. But I didn't fall out with Kev because it was a business decision. Mine was so as long as I've never used Kev to get along. And so we stayed friends and, went to his parties, went to a couple of his weddings. And he's come to my house. I mean, he used to come to my house even when I wasn't a Nash consultant. We stayed friends, and I'm more proud of my association with Kevin Nash than I am with Nash. So Kevin always said, "You're with Nutrabaits." Yeah, I was the only person who was allowed to have a Nash consultancy who also used Nutrabaits. He says, because I think you're a pillock. He says, you're using the wrong bait, and my baits, as Kev would say. But I respect the fact that they gave you a chance and you've not jumped for 6 pieces of silver. And I respect.
What was he like back in the day? You said that there's a bit of change in him. Any instances at conferences or any talks?
Kev was always, although people used to think he was arrogant, he wasn't. That was, in many ways, Kev is shy.
Yeah.
And he was sort of that's his suit. He put on his suit of armour. But what I liked was he always gave people chances. He was probably a bit naive with people, and he gave people chances, probably shouldn't have had chances, but he was a grafter. And again, he was like Tim, and when I stayed at Kev's house, it was like, we'd be going to work at 5, I'd come down do a couple of days work with him and stuff, interviews. He'd be going to work at 5 a.m. I mean, it's the Alan Blair thing, isn't it? Alan Blair is not Alan Blair by mistake.
No.
There's a lot of Kev in Alan Blair, the work ethic.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
And I am that way as well. And so, yeah, a lot of Kev, you know, Tim, Kev, Alan Blair, that grinding work ethic, so he's not particularly dissimilar now. We have our fallouts. We have our arguments about things, we used to have a discussion on back leads and this and that and whatever. But it was never, ever personal. It was just opinions. And you leave him to one side, but still the same man now. Just met him now, and he's still the same man. Still takes the mickey out the hair, and we still, you know, we had great times. We flew to Bavaria, Jim Gibbonson, him, me, and our partners, and we did a talk in a cowshed. I want to say a cowshed. It was a cowshed that had been literally emptied out. Seats were put in there, and it stunk of cows. But it was incredible, you know, Jim Gibbonson, me, and him. And at those days, I'm thinking, wow, we're this like the new breed. And like, look now, we're like, wow, we're like last of the summer wine.
But you're still here, and I think probably the most poignant point for me with regards to you at the time. And throughout your whole angling, if you like, is that it's never been about working in the industry. It's never been about a paycheck. It's never been that. You haven't needed that. No, you've had a brilliant law career, and it's not been the motivation. So to do all that, to have that work ethic, to have those relationships, and to sustain all the way through to now, that is a labour of love, isn't it?
I just love Carp. Tim's the same. Yeah, and that's Tim. You know, Tim never asked. You know, Tim had a business, but when we did slideshows, there was no asking for money. There was no charging. Every time he got asked to write a chapter for a book, Tim would not say, is it £250 or 4 copies? Tim would say, oh, me. Oh, I'd love to write a chapter for a book. When he gets asked to write a magazine or do a podcast, we were brought up in the era where it was just nice to do it. You don't want to lose, you know, or whatever, but I'm just happy to do it. And that's the way I've been. It was never about the money, because I think when it becomes about the money, all of a sudden it becomes a job. And there are not many people in the industry who are as keen now as they were 10 years ago. And there are very few people in the industry who've carp fished from 86 to 2022, it'll be, without a break and still love it as much. And nobody can ever say, they'll always say, God, I'm still excited about it. I'm still excited about 17-pounder. I'm still excited about my friends catching, like Joe Turnbull catching a carp yesterday. I'm still excited about watching YouTube videos. I'm still excited about... So it's never been a job. It's always been about being excited about fishing. And you can't put a price on that. You can earn $100,000 a year for 10 years, all that money, and then blow out a fishing. I think, it's money, mate. It's just a bigger house. It's a bigger car, but you're blown out of it. Longevity for me is everything. You know, Kiss, the Rolling Stones, people like that. They don't need the money anymore.
No.
Kev doesn't need the money anymore. I don't need to write anymore, but I just love it. I love the interactions. I love the dawns. I love this. Every time somebody says, do you want to do a podcast? It's like, oh, me. Even though it maybe shouldn't be like that, but I'm still that 17-year-old. I'm still that first article for carp fishing. Every time I get an article in a magazine, I'm proud.
Yes.
I don't take it for granted.
No, that's a great outlook to keep considering what you've done in your career, and you'll be very modest and humble about that, I know. Do you think if you were fishing and catching loads and loads of big fish, a la sort of a modern day scene, do you think you'd have burnt out? Do you think you'd have given up the ghost, if you like?
I don't know that I'd have burnt out, because it would only be, I would have had that 1995 moment and thought, if I lived somewhere else, I would be catching a lot more. I'd be catching the same number of carp probably, but bigger carp. And a lot of people would say, if I moved house and fished other waters and caught a lot bigger fish, because you can pick the right waters. You don't have to pick the big. You can pick the right waters and catch a lot of carp. And then people would say, he's some carp angler, that guy. I didn't really rate him, but he's caught a lot of carp. Now, that's their impression. Don't make any difference to me what somebody thinks about me and my carp fishing. So would I be going and catching all those big carp for them or for me? If I ever feel disappointment about the fish I'm catching, I'll go somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I've never done it I did it till 1995 because I thought, oh yeah, I don't do it for anybody else. I do it for me. And so I know that if when I caught Decade at 49.6, it's like, wow, great angling, Jules. And there were so many congratulations, and no disrespect, Decade probably meant more to thousands of other people than it meant to me. It was a lovely big fish that if I never catch another one as big as that again, I won't lose any sleep.
Talk to me about the capture. It is a mega fish, and I've got a lovely photo of it.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, Kevin had asked me to come down loads of times, and I wasn't really bothered. My friend Duff Batty, who was the Kiss PR, I got that wrong. Kiss PR. He did lots of things for me. We'd meet the bands, we'd hang out with the groups, and I thought, what do you give the man who has everything? And so I thought, I tell you what, I'd taken him fishing at various places. He caught 25-pounders. I thought I'd take him down to Church Lake. Chance of meeting Nash. He loved Nash, one of his, people he looked up to. He might catch a big one. So I did it really for Duff as for me. It wasn't, something I...
Yeah, you'd have gone before, wouldn't you?
Yeah. So we got set up. Duff got in his swim. I got in my swim. And I just applied the same work ethic that I did catching 25-pounders as I did fishing for decades. So the first thing I did was the biggest mistake ever. I walked in the office and 4 people gave me 4 different ideas of how to catch fish from there. It's, you need to be on the maggots, you need to be on zigs, you need to be in the edge, you need to be... it was like, oh man, it's the first night I was totally confused. I didn't know whether to fish near the island, in the edge. And I thought, I've got to have a word with myself here because I'm undoing...
Yeah.
So it'd be 2012. So I was undoing probably 20 years of carp fishing. I thought, this is ridiculous. And I remember in the middle of the night, I was halfway down the far bank and I could hear carp slopping on my left-hand side. And when a carp, 35 to 45 pounds, jumps out, I suppose it's a bit like Dawn French dropping in the bath, isn't it? Yeah, I can say that. You don't sleep through. Well, I say you don't sleep through Dawn French. You don't sleep through a 45-pound carp head and shouldering next to you. And I woke up and I thought they're to my left, and I couldn't get there, so I moved and then got set up, and then I could hear them moving, and I moved again, and I moved again, and I thought they're not near the island; they're right in the edge. And so all I did was adapt the same tactics that I was catching 17 to 30 pounders on. I fished a slack line, I fished in the edge, I had that overweighted pop-up, I had the handful of bait, I sat well back, my line was on the floor, I waited till bite time, I think it was a 30 to start with, and then middle of the afternoon it trundled off, I struck it, I was on the far bank, and it went almost to the island, weeded me up, and I eventually played it in, and my mate Duff, he got down to his shorts, waded out, and it went in the net. And I went, how big is it, mate? He says, I won't say the word he used. He says, it's absolutely massive. And I said, how big? He says, I don't know. So we walked it in and I looked in the net and it was somewhere between 30 and 60. I'd never caught a carp over 35 pound. And Kev said to me, if you get a big one, ring the office. I want to come and see it. So ring the office and I've got a big one, mate. How big is it? I says, I've no idea. It's somewhere between 30 and 60. And he went, you northern. I won't use the next word. He said, you've been fucking catching two sort of pasties or pasties and 20 pounders. He says, don't you even know what a big cat is? I've no idea. So we came down, took it on the net, weighed it, and it was 49.6 decade. Now, when your personal best was 34, 35, it was ginormous.
Yeah.
And the look on Kev's face was just, he was so proud. It was like, I thought, you're my dad. He had that look. Bit young to be sorry to Kev. It was that look. He was so proud for me. He says, you do so much wrangling and you take so little out of it. And for you to catch that, it was absolutely brilliant. And I was so proud to catch it. And the thing is, I think they put the picture up on the web, and it literally burnt the Nash website out because there were so many people saying, we're so pleased he's got that. And it was like, wow. And then I caught another, I think I caught a 38 the next morning. And it was just like, I drove home and it was like the tyres weren't touching the ground. It was like I floated home. And I thought, my personal best was 34. I've got to caught a 32, a 49 and 38. Now, you've got to remember nowadays, that's maybe no big deal. But for me, it was like, and I thought, and it never changed me. And I just was happy to catch this. Next week, I was fishing local water for 70. But it was a moment I'll never forget that I put in a box that was just so important. And people, not just Kev, other people were so pleased for me. And I thought, all those things of giving back in angling, people are so, there was no, but it's Kev's back. I mean, there was one or two who said it's Kev's back pond. Now, these are people who'd been, poo-poo in Longfield, then moved on to Horton and, or fished Ashley and I thought, it doesn't matter what anybody, their view of my fish doesn't affect me. But I would say 99% of people were so pleased for me. And it was just one of those moments, it was one of those golden moments, like the first time I met Kiss, it was Slash, the first time I got your first car. It was, a defining moment for me. Not the weight. The weight was immaterial. It was just this huge thing. But it was a carp.
A carp.
And a half.
Just another carp.
Just a carp and a half. Yeah, it was just another 49 for me. Well, I should have retired then.
Yeah, job done. Talk to me a little bit about, you mentioned your overweighted pop-up. You mentioned that rig, the claw rig, whatever you want to call it, that's become synonymous with your angling even to this very day. Talk to me about, because I talk to loads of people in the podcast who are distinguished anglers who fish for years, caught everything under the sun, and it always seems to come back to the same trait, that they find something they're confident in through trial and error and they stick with it. How did you come across the components, the aspects of that rig that you still use to this day?
Well, it's quite funny because in the 80s, when I first started carp fishing, mid-80s, there was 3 types of waters. The southern waters were gravel pits. The sort of Midlands, Shropshire, that was silt, Manchester, and we were weed. So if you wanted to fish in weed, you had to use pop-ups. And I mean, they were blatant pop-ups and they were 4 inches off the deck, but they worked. You could chuck a bottom bait out then. Yeah, you would often get a take, and I remember people down south used to say, God, look at that pop-up rig. What a noddy rig. Yeah, but that's not what I would have been using on a gravel pit. You come and chuck your, bottom bait out on my water, it's in the weed, you ain't catching anything. And the first time I twigged it was all the guys who used to fish bottom baits used to chuck them out, and if they had a run, it was always in the first 5 minutes. And then they usually landed at one, but if they got a run after that, it often fell out. And I think what was happening is sometimes it dropped perfectly and they got a pick up quickly. But when carp are moving about and disturbing the weed and the silt, and it's been an overnight, that weed, and I think sometimes the carp would pick the bait up, not even know it was attached to a hook or anything, and it was pulling out. They weren't getting good hook holds. And I realised that it's not about using a pop up, it's about keeping the hook off the bottom. And I realised that whatever the hook point was off the bottom, it was fishing. And the majority of my waters have been weedy waters. And yes, you can chuck a bottom bait out there, and I see people do it still and catch some. But to me, the mechanics of a rig are the hook point. That hook point has to be in the carp's mouth. And to me, pop-ups, it's a popped up hook with the bait as low to the bottom as possible. So I realised that now I used to use braid and things like that, and you'd use coated braid and you'd tie hairs to it. And I remember it always was okay, but it was never great, and you'd loop them on and things like that. And I remember Mike Kavanagh wrote this thing about the multi-rig, and this would probably be early 2000s. Mike Kavanagh, who we used to do the carping on, we used to do the rig clinic, and he showed me this, and it had a loop, and this loop allowed you to just have a bait screw or tie it. And I thought, wow, that just sits it perfectly. You're not tying a hair or things like that. And I thought, that's perfect. And I looked how he did it. And the first time I did it, and I remember it was Christon, snake bite or something like that. It was a garden mugger hook, and it was like a 2 mil Drennan run ring. It was dental floss burnt round. It was a great big lump of Christon heavy metal putty, a 3 ounce lead. But when you chucked it on the floor, it just sat perfectly. And literally from 2007 onwards, every time I used that, I caught fish. And bit by bit, you start fine tuning it. And I realised actually, you don't actually need, with hard pop-ups, you don't actually need to floss them on. You bait screw them on. And then I realised that actually a shot was better than putty, because it didn't come off. Being a tight Yorkshireman, I don't want to lose my putty. Even if I got it for free, it hurt to lose stuff for free. And then you realise that actually you don't need that kind of bend of hook. You actually can get a better bend of hook with a better angle with shrink tube. And all you're doing is fine tuning it. So the version I use nowadays is simply a fine-tuned version. And I would say I've used that exclusive. I would say that 95% of my fish that haven't been caught off the top or on a zig have been caught on that fish. So we're talking thousands of carp since 2007, 2008. And you do fine tune things. So sometimes I've got it now to, I can tie 20 in about 10 minutes. It's that simple. But the overweighted bit is if, people talk about critically balancing pop-ups, and if you've ever watched carp in the water, certainly in the summer, if when they start feeding, that critically balanced pop-up is all over the place, where your freebies on the bottom aren't moving because they're heavier. And I thought, this is this doesn't work like that. So I realised that the carp with a critically balanced bait, it might work in winter, in the Rob Malin's book, when the carp was sort of slowly sidling up and, do it feeding that way. But in the summer, when you watch the carp in the edge, there's stuff all over the place. And I realised that this critically balanced bait was wafting all over the place. I'd read a really good article by Bruce Ashby in Carp Fisher in the 90s, and he was overshotting pop-ups at Save in the edge because he watched these carp and the free offerings were all over the place, but that one that wasn't moving, they went for it, and they were getting better hook holds. And so all of a sudden I started overshotting, and every hook hold then was so much better. And people say to me, yeah, but don't they see the shot? I'm like, do they see the shot? Well, I think if they see the shot, mate, they certainly see the hook. And if they see the hook, they certainly see the main line. And then they're like, yeah, but do they not feel the way to the hook and the way to the shot? I'm like, have you seen what carp will suck stones in and blow them out? That overweighted pop-up nails it down so that hook is spinning round like a claw saying, I want to grab you. So when the carp sucks at the bait, it goes up. It can't go anywhere because it's full extension, and it pings it in the bottom lip. And that overweighted pop-up is so good. But the problem with most carp anglers, and, when people say to me, what's the mistake? People are sloppy. You tell them exactly what to do, and they say, well, I couldn't get a twister. I couldn't get any shots, so I did this, and I couldn't get any shrink tube. And what you've told them to do is nothing like what they're doing. Yeah. And I realised that if you're going to have an edge on rigs, it has to be exact. And anybody who tells me that a sharp hook doesn't get you any more bites or rigs don't make a difference, it's absolute rubbish. I'll very rarely actually say there's black and white in fishing, but people who say that any rig will catch them, and you don't have to have a sharp hook. If the carp are ravenous, then you can get away with it. But they're not always like that. So that rig is something I use all the time. And the amount of people that have actually gone onto it, and I haven't anybody who said, I've gone to that multi-rig, but it didn't work for me, mate. But there are thousands that say, I went onto that multi-rig, and it's not my multi-rig, it's Mike Kavanagh's multi-rig that I fine-tuned as I use it. But it's caught people so many carp.
Sharpened hooks as well, mate.
Oh,
thicker, aren't you?
Massive. And I still don't get how anybody can say that in the right position, a sharpened hook doesn't convert more pickups into bites. Yes, if the carp have got soft mouths and new fish. Yes, if you're fishing on the bottom and there's gravel. But anybody who's fishing a pop-up, that carp, when it touches that hook, it hooks itself because the less pressure for the same amount, the less force sinks the hook in further. It is undeniable about it. And you show people at conferences, you show them a baiting needle and you show them a disgorger, and you say the baiting needle is your sharpened hook and your disgorger is your packet hook. And the same amount of pressure puts the baiting needle into you, whereas the disgorger, same amount of pressure, it doesn't go in. All it is that amount of pressure will sink the point in further. It's because it's like the difference between a shard and a pyramid.
Yeah.
And I don't know anybody who's caught any less carp because they've used a sharpened hook. Sometimes you can use it in the wrong place. If you're fishing tight up to snags, it can cut a carp's mouth if you're fishing on the bottom. But in the right circumstances, a sharpened hook will always outcatch a packet hook. And I'll stand by that.
What about corrosion? If you're fishing silty meres, for example.
All depends on the water. Somewhat, it's really funny, isn't it? Somewhat, it's like, I always think it's like hook baits. You can go in with a pineapple on some water and it's the one. And yet it's the acidity of it. And yet on other waters, you've got to use a condensed milk, or you've got, and I think that's the acidity of the water or the pH of the water. There are some waters where literally it will corrode in hours. But I obviously coat it in in the Vaselines and things like that. And that makes a difference. Obviously, if you're fishing rainbow and putting your hook out there for 3 days, it's not something you would do.
Yeah.
It's horses for courses. But for anybody who's fishing short sessions, certainly overnighters, and they're not getting crowded hooks and the fishing pop-ups, you are not going to get any less carp on a sharpened hook, honestly.
I like that. While we're on the theme of short sessions, because short sessions is your bag, you now, post sort of retirement, and you've definitely done your time working really hard in a demanding job.
Some of my staff wouldn't say that. He gave the appearance of working hard in a full-time job.
That's off the battle, Jules. Doing it with style, mate. It's what it's all about.
It's not what people know. It's what they think they know.
You could now, if you like, go and fish anywhere. You could fish for 20-week sessions. You could fish rainbow for 40 weeks. You could do whatever you want, but you don't. Why do you not?
Life to me is more than fishing. There's my bike riding, there's raws, there's my family commitments, there's my friends, there's music. I'm as passionate about my carp fishing in a box, but I'm as passionate about my bike riding. When I'm bike riding, I'm bike riding. When I'm reading my music books, I'm reading my music books. Yes, I could go and dedicate my life to carp fishing, but I don't want to be that bloke who wakes up one day and goes, oh, I wish I hadn't. I've no regrets at all. All the concerts I've been to. So many of my friends say, I saw that Throwback Thursday of that concert in 1984. I wish I'd gone to that. I go, but you could have gone to it. You just decided to stay home. And so the thing with fishing, I've always managed to find that balance point of wanting to fish a bit more, wanting to catch maybe a bigger fish, but also wanting to enjoy the other things in life. I want to bike ride. I want to spend more time with Ross. I wanted to spend, I had all those years with my mum and dad that you can't undo.
Yeah.
You can't undo. When I, think of my dad, I don't think, God, if I had we went everywhere. And I think now, if hopefully I won't drop dead tomorrow, but I won't look back and go, Joe, if I'd just done that instead of me fishing. So the reason I don't do any longer sessions is I fish probably 4 sessions a week, somewhere between 3 hours and, maybe 14 hours. I time them when the fish are feeding. And the thing about carp fishing, since I've retired, timing is everything. It's all about the timing. And you'll see on so many waters that bite time is a certain 2 or 3 hour gap. I've seen it, last couple of months, bite time on 3-4 different waters I'm fishing has been 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Then it's 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Then it's 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock. And you can see now that it's that 7 o'clock till 10 o'clock. You can hear them rolling. And that's the ability to fish 4 times a week at the right times makes you look a whole lot better than you are. I look at my Instagram feed and think, I actually look quite good, but I've only probably fished 18 hours this week.
Yeah.
Doesn't make me better than anybody else, but I've fished 4 5-hour sessions at the right time. And I've realised now that when people say that time it doesn't equate success. It does, because you're there long enough to be there at bite time. And I'm not saying that the long stay anglers only catch because of that. There are a few amounts of long stay anglers who catch anyway, but there are others who it's just because they're there. I'm only catching a lot of carp because of everything I've learned from 1986. The lessons I learned, the timing, the work rate, the balance, the sharpened hook. All of what looks easy is not because it's easy, but it's all the lessons plus being there at the right time. I could have all that ability, be at work, and if bite time is 2 till 3, I can look the biggest fool ever. They'll say, if I went back to work now, people would say, he's not catching as many as he used to do. And it wouldn't be because I'm a worse carp angler. It's that I'm just not doing the time. So I look at my results now and I'm probably catching 5 times more carp, maybe 10 times. And it's not because I've got 10 times better an angler, but I've got the ability to fish at the right time of year.
Talk to me about short sessions then, Jules, because this is applicable to, especially as we're coming into winter, but also just to anglers in general who've got jobs, who might have busy family lives. Yeah. The concept of short sessions is it allows you to go and get your fix and hopefully catch a few, but you just said it there. If you're not there at the right times or doing the right things or approaching it in the right manner, it can be quite soul destroying in terms of a lot of effort for not a lot of return. Yeah. You've done a lot of it.
Yeah.
Talk to me about key points around short sessions.
Well, the first thing you have to decide is, am I doing short sessions because I enjoy my fishing, which is fine, doesn't matter where you fish then, or am I doing short sessions because I want to catch lots of carp? If you're going regularly, not catching many but enjoying it, it doesn't matter. But when you're going and fishing short sessions and you're not catching, you're getting frustrating, you need to be realistic. It's not somebody else's fault. It's not the way things are. There is a way to change things. And what's that definition of stupidity? Doing the same thing all the time and expecting a different result. The first thing you need to do, and I've realised this myself, I realised this years ago when I used to fish all winter in Yorkshire and catch one carp and then go down to Willow Park and fish one session and catch 12. And that wasn't that I'd become 12 times a better angler or 100 times. I was just in the right place at the right time. If you want to catch carp on short sessions, first of all, you need to find a water where there is a good number of fish. People do not catch a lot of carp on low stock waters. People who are catching carp regularly are either people who are not working or who fish the right waters, or both. So you need to find a water that is productive. You need to find a water that you can access during the productive times. So it's research. If those fish are coming out at night and you're doing Saturday afternoons, you are wasting your time. I don't care. If Terry Hearn goes down and fishes Saturday afternoons when those fish are feeding at night, he ain't catching any. Not because he's lost his ability, but he's there at the wrong time. So it's the right water, and it's finding bite times and getting yourself there. And if you want it enough, you will get yourself there at the right times. And the right times are often the middle of the night. And one of my friends taught me, he used to work down the pit. And he would turn up at 10 o'clock at night after we were all set up on a Friday, and he would literally stand till 1 o'clock in the morning listening for fish. And where, they would be rolling in the middle of the night while we're all out giving the big Zs. He would move on the fish. And in the morning, he'd had one or two, despite being the last one there, because he put himself on the fish. So short sessions are the right water, right time, and getting yourself on them. And getting yourself on them means, don't go to Linear on a Saturday afternoon and go, or Norton, I can't get on the fish. You've got to be realistic. So find somewhere where you can actually get fishing and where there is possible to get a swim. And if you have to travel for it, it's better to go once every week to somewhere where you're going to catch than to go 3 times a week to somewhere you're not. So you need to find out, do your research. When are these fish being caught? I mean, in this day and age, there are so many waters. Yeah. You may have to say fish for 15 to 20 pounders instead of 20 to 25s, or you may need to fish for 8 to 14 pounders to get your short session fix. But once you find that envelope, you've got to be prepared. You need to have those rigs tied. All this rubbish about I turn up at the lake and then I decide what rig I'm going to use. Well, that's great if you're there for a week, but if you're a short session angler, it's like you don't want to spend every time you're tying a rig up or making a PVA bag or whatever, you are not looking at the water. So you need to go prepared, 10 rigs tied up, PVA bags tied up, everything neat so that you're on the fish. You're on the fish. And you need to be energetic. So you fish where the fish are or as near as you can get them on them. And then if they show where you are not and you can get on, you move. You have to move. And it's that clinical. Nobody catches regular and short sessions by accident. You'll get the odd one, but there will be a pattern. And it's, a rig you're happy with, a bait you're happy with, having everything being prepared and being able to move. Nobody moves quickly because tackle's everywhere. I'm not suggesting you're OCD, but I often fish off a barrow because even on days, a full day session overnight, because you get the bivvy up and you think, I can't be bothered. Next week it's too late because so short sessions are all about being on it all the time.
I like that energy. Bait for you. I know that you were, when I first, probably a little bit later into my sort of following of you as I was coming through, you were a big advocate of the key, mate, weren't you? And sort of a high nutritional bait. And now Scopex squid. Yeah. Bait-wise for you, has it always been nutrition over sort of, I don't know, high attract flavour?
if I'm fishing a water regularly, it's always been about a food bait. So in the Nutribaits days, it was like big fish mix, trigger. With the Nash, it was the key and it's Scopex squid. I always find that putting that bait in regularly gives me more bites. There's no point going, if you're only fishing the water once and saying, I'm going in on Scopex squid because I'm only fishing once. If other people are putting Scopex squid in, then that's common sense. But for me, because I tend to campaign fish 2 or 3 waters a year, I've got a bait that I know that carp will eat on virtually every water. And I know a bait that when I leave in the morning, I'll put some out freebie out. So I'm always a feed bait. But if you're flip-flopping all over the place, it's high attract. Well, first of all, it's what's coming. If they're all getting done on Sticky Manila or Scopex squid or Cell or whatever, being quite honest, and if you're not tied to a bait company, you go in on what's working.
Yeah.
That is the first thing. But for me, I know that wherever I put Scopex squid on a campaign, they're going to eat it and they're going to continue eating it and they like it.
This time of year, if you've got a local water, you're looking at doing some short sessions, what sort of pre-bait do you put any in through the winter?
If I've already fished the water regularly and I'm going to keep fishing it, I will pre-bait, but not until I'm absolutely sure they're in certain areas. You ain't moving fish with bait at this time of year, in reality. The first thing you need to do at this time is to know where they are, is to find where they are. A lot of my waters now, they're starting to settle down. They're less active. They're starting to hang around the reed beds more. So if I was fishing a water, and I knew I was fishing it twice in a week, I would bait the areas up when I left that I know that they are going to be in. I wouldn't bait a swim up thinking, I'll bait that 2 or 3 days in a row and they'll be on that. If they don't want to be in that area, all the bait in the world is not going to move them. So for me, I would only bait a water up if I was fishing it regularly, once or twice a week, or certainly every week, and I absolutely knew where those fish were. And that there's no point baiting the reeds up if you can't fish in the reeds. No point baiting the snags up because you're encouraging them to stay in the snags. But, if you can bait where the fish are going into the reeds or around the reeds, then that's a great area to fish. So don't bait up at this time of year unless you know where the fish are and you're fishing that water regularly.
I love that. Good tips. You said there a key one was sort of be active, be on it, which is sort of, even in my sort of experience, a sort of a key downfall of some anglers. And some anglers might not want to do that. They might just want to chill out, which is completely fair enough. Being active, being up and about has sort of been a key theme throughout your whole life. But lifestyle-wise, and we joked about it off camera before, probably very different to what your stereotypical carp angler is in terms of your lifestyle. Very active, very health conscious, keep yourself fit. We talked about biking. Has that always been a constant through your life?
Yeah, I think it has. Yeah, certainly. I've always I've got a gym at home, and I've always been in the gym since probably the early 90s. And I've always realised that I've never caught any less carp by being healthy. And the more in tune I am with myself, the better I fish. If I'm feeling tired and lethargic and overweight, if I've had a load of cheese, if I've had a load of, sugar, boom, then I never fish as well. It's different things for different people. Some people want to go and they want to chill out and have the mates and the beers. That's great. But to me, the more in tune I am with myself, the better I fish. It's, you look at sportsmen and things like that. The best sportsmen look after themselves. You don't have to be super fit, but most people who are good at anything are not lethargic. And I just find that for me, because of my build, I have to be very careful with stuff. I'd love to eat cheese and biscuits on the bank and Mars bars and sausage rolls, but I know an hour into the session, it'd be like, do I really want to move? Power barrow. I still don't want to move. And I just find that by keeping fit, the older you get, the harder it is as well. When you're young, you can get away with the energy drinks, the Mars bars, because you're burning those calories off. But as you get older, it gets harder. It definitely gets harder. So keeping fit has not cost me any carp. But the day, I remember one of my friends, Tony Powell, he was very high up in the music business and he lived a certain lifestyle. And when we would go fishing together, it would be the wine. He'd have the wine, the cheese and the biscuits. And one time I thought, I'll have half a glass of wine and cheese and biscuits. And about an hour in, I'm thinking, I just go and lay on the bed chair. And it's, it's horses for courses, though. When you're 17, it'll be like, what on earth's he talking about? Couple of Mars bars, bit of Monster Red Bull energy, and like, on it, Gov.
Yeah.
Rough.
There's a lot of, I like the little insinuations of these mates and these connections. There don't seem to be a vice, Julian, with you, mate. Like, it doesn't seem to be like there's sort of relentless work ethic, like good lifestyle choices, a passion for carp fishing, family life. There doesn't seem to be a sort of an off button with it all. What, I mean, I know fishing is, but is there anything else? You said music before has always been
an off button for that. I would like to think, vices, but yeah, I mean, obviously when I was a younger lad, I had a lot of friendships.
Yeah.
Not a lot of female friendships, but that was just part of growing up.
Yeah.
But you are a product of your environment, and I was brought up by mum and dad, and I worked at Core. So really, your vices were restricted. And I've always never needed to live outside of who I am. So I don't need to get drunk. I don't need to get high. I don't need people to tell me I'm great, because I'm happy about myself.
Yeah.
What other people think doesn't really bother me if it's not true. So I've always found that as long as I do what I'm doing and do it well, I'm cool about that. So I don't need self-affirmation. It's lovely when people say, blah, 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 but I don't need somebody else telling me something about me that I know is not true to make me feel better. So there is an off button, but like, you're only here once, aren't you? And, all the things, I'm like anybody. I love Netflix. I love my Formula One on telly. I love, Narcos and things like that. I like that as well. And I love to read, but I've never been able to have downtime. I'm like Tim and Kev. I can't imagine Kev has downtime. I can't imagine Tim has downtime. We're always productivity.
Yeah, it's definitely a trait that you see in successful people, regardless of what it is that just constant on in some form. It might be lesser productive phases, but it's still on, isn't it?
Yeah, I try and do things to the best of. I find out how I want to do something. I don't do always everything great. So I'm a cyclist, but I know that if I went onto a road bike, I know that if I dropped 2 stone and got ultra lean and clipped in, I could average 22 mile an hour instead of 17 mile an hour. But that doesn't float my boat. What floats my boat is going out and doing 60 miles on my own, in the fresh air, having a coffee, unwinding.
Yeah.
So once you find the level that you want to do something for you and not for others, life's dead easy. I don't care that somebody's got a Range Rover and I've got a Ford Cougar. I've had the flashy cars, but once you find you're comfortable with yourself, life is dead easy. It's finding that, though.
Yeah, was that all you said? That was always in you with regards to sort of feeling like you didn't have anything to prove and you were quite centered. That's always been the case?
Oh, no. I mean, I always laugh about this because when I was at school, I was the kid that nobody hung around with. If you could imagine a fourth person in the in-betweeners, I would have been the fat guy.
Cool.
Yeah, I would have been the fat guy. Because if you imagine it, at school, I was the overweight kid.
You're overweight, George?
Oh, yeah, I was, yeah. Not, I wasn't a big lad, but I wasn't I didn't play rugby football. So, what your mums are like, oh, we like him chubby, he's a good, what mums are like, feed you. Yeah. So I was a lad who was a bit overweight, who got this very nice short haircut because his mum liked it, who had a pet rabbit, who liked rock music and Kiss, who went fishing, whose mum was a vicar, who didn't have a motorbike or a car, who didn't smoke, didn't drink, didn't like dancing. That...
Oh, your beauty.
Yeah, that is like... Could you imagine that's a Tinder profile? That would be... Yeah. That wouldn't be swipe, that'd be turn it off. So, yeah. I've always realised, that's who I was. And as I've grown older, I still like Kiss. I still... I still like Pets. I still have the same ethos that I had when I was a kid. And, you just tune things and you realise that actually if you're trying to be something you're not, you can never be that. It's always, well, if I just catch another 40-pounder or I catch another 50-pounder, people say it's the new Tell. They won't, mate. There's 100 people catching those. And if I just get a bigger car, people think I'm impressive. Well, no, they'll just think you've got it at least high, mate. And it's once you're happy in your own way, it took me a long time. I would say it got to probably the mid-90s before I realised, actually, it doesn't matter how many carp I've caught. It doesn't matter, what my girlfriend looks like. It doesn't matter how much money I've earned. That's not going to make them saying you are great. If I don't feel great, isn't going to make me inwardly, if you're honest with yourself. So I wouldn't say I've always had it. It took me, it's something you get to that crossroads and you go, either I'm going to play at this or I'm going to be, comfortable people are comfortable in their own skin. They've nothing to prove.
I love that.
Do you not think Terry Hearn thinks 1 second,
I don't care,
I just need to catch a few more, so just keep my profile up. He does not give a monkeys about that at all. All the people who are good at, Alan Blair doesn't do all this because he thinks people have got to think I'm Red Bull Blair. I've got to keep on. Alan does it because that's the way he is. Yeah. All people who are like that, it doesn't happen overnight. You find the person you are by going left, by right, by left, by right, and eventually you center yourself.
What do you think that is? I'm not necessarily talking about profile and stuff that you said before, but just regards to sort of feeling happy within your own skin. Do you think that the sort of newer generation of angler with social media and everything else, that's becoming more and more difficult?
I think it is difficult because you've got you are bombarded with images of food, images of cars, images of beautiful women, images of carp, and it's just like it's just like unattainable. I mean, I remember as a kid, and thank goodness my mum and dad are not here now. I used to have to do a paper round. And paper round was good because every fourth Thursday there would be a brown envelope that would appear.
Nice.
And I always knew that the brown envelope was Mr. Such and Such Down's copy of Men Only or Playboy.
I thought this was Money, mate.
No, Men Only. And I used to think, so, I always on that fourth Thursday, I'd get in a bit earlier. I'd have a look and think, wow, all girls look like that. And when I grew up a bit, I realised that all girls didn't look like Men Only. And it's sort of like all carp aren't like what you see on Instagram. You see that Instagram full of images of carp and you think that everybody else is catching. And I can feel that way sometimes. I look and think, another 40, another 50, another... And if you actually pick up Terry Hearn's book, pick up Darryl Peck's book and note the amount of days they're doing for the amount of carp they're catching, actually, you're probably not getting it wrong. It's don't let other people's successes dictate your fishing. Mm-hmm. And I think you can become, look at the quality of that picture. I've got to live up to that. And look at the size of that carp. It's like, I think it burns people out because they think, I'm never going to be successful. Being successful is not being on the front of Carp Feed or Angling Times or whatever. Being successful is actually being happy with what you were doing yourself. Other people won't validate that. It's you. But I think it's harder nowadays because there's more people doing it. There are more jobs in industry, but there's more people chasing it. It's a lot harder now to get into the industry just catching fish.
Oh yeah,
impossible. If almost impossible.
Yeah, exactly. Too right. I wanted to talk a little bit around a little bit in more detail with regards to writing. Now, we've glossed over sort of Carp Fishing Magazine and Tim, but it has been a feature throughout pretty much the entirety of your days. Even up until this point, you're writing on social media, but you're writing and contributing towards magazines. You said you loved writing and that fishing's a passion and a way of doing that. For you, the sort of journey that you've had within writing, you've obviously done a lot of article-based stuff with various publications and your involvement with that, but you've also had books. Yeah. Like, how do you set your stall out with regards to your writing journey? Or was it just a case of, this opportunity's there, I'll write, and this opportunity's there? Or has it been sort of planned as like, I want to do a book to sort of talk about this? How has that gone for you?
In the early days, as I say, at school, I was not much good. And there was one teacher, English teacher, Eric Taylor, who showed an interest in me. That sounds terrible, doesn't it, nowadays? An English teacher showed an interest in me.
For legal reasons.
He showed an interest in my ability to work. And he taught me to write. He says, now, one of the ways to write stories, Julian, is just to write the conclusion first and then build it up after that. So, go back to it. I thought that's a clever idea. And I realised it was one of the few things I was actually any good at writing, because Mum was a writer as well. Mum wrote 13 books.
Yeah.
Yeah, Deaconess, and she wrote 13 books. Mum was great at short stories. So I think you inherit a bit of your parents' genetics. I love reading as well. So my life was Sounds, Kerrang, the magazines. And I love reading. Pictures are okay, but I love reading. So when people say we're just bringing out the new version of this book and it's a coffee table book with 800 pictures in and like 3,000 words, I'm like, can't we have 80,000 words and 3 pictures? That's the way I was brought up.
Yeah.
I'm a word man. And I started to write 1 or 2 little things for, like little pieces for fishing magazines, little 500 words. And then I realised, actually, I can do this. And then obviously I wrote about pike fishing, about fishing for tench. And then I wrote the one for Tim, and Tim showed an interest in me. And then I wrote for the CAA. And I thought, do you know what? I used to read other people's articles, and I used to say, you've caught a lot bigger carp than me. But you don't, the way you write about it, whether you're writing about a 17 or a 47, it's the same way. It's just a different. And I realised actually I wasn't a bad writer, and I was also a grafter. So I got involved with people who were writers. And then Coarse Fishermen came on board. I used to love Coarse Fishermen, and Coarse Fishermen had John Bailey, who was one of their regular writers. And I started writing a monthly column for them. And in 1990, I'd obviously written 1 book for Tim, but it was called Carp Waters, and it was just like the BK guide to 500 carp waters. And obviously my prominence had just started to rise. And John Bailey, who had links with Crowood, because he wrote a lot of Crowood books, said, Crowood have realised there's a big interest in carp fishing. Would you like to write a carp fishing book? And I thought, well, yeah, I would. And so it was only twice have I taken 6 months off fishing. And I literally sat down, wrote all the titles. If I wanted to carp fish, a book on carp fishing, because they were all storybooks in those days.
Yeah.
What would be a book that I could read from first page to last page that would help me catch carp? So it would have rods, it would have reels, it would have buzzers, it would have casting, it would have rig tying, it would have. And so I literally wrote a synopsis, sent it off to John Bailey, said, that's great, write the book. And it just felt so, it was just like writing, it was probably 80,000 words. So it was like writing 20 articles. It was only 20. So if somebody said, write 25 articles, that's all it was. They liked it. Successful carp fishing took off. I mean, that sold over 14,000 articles.
Yeah.
But that's a lot of books.
That's a lot of books.
And then, of course, they said, we want to follow up. So we'll do successful carp fishing, which was the bits that I hadn't covered in practical. And then BK said, well, we'd like you to write one on starting carp fishing. So I dumbed down practical carp fishing. And then Kevin said, I'd like you to write one with me on cart rigs. And then obviously I did a modern one. But no, I've never found it a difficulty. But I always plan them out. There's always be a day or two of, I always have a plan about my writing. I don't go, right, I'm just going to write. Because what you do is, if you do it that way, and I spoke to my friend Joe Turnbull about this, about writing. I said, you see many books where somebody's written a history of themselves and they spent 3/4 of the books doing the first third of their history. And then they've gone, oh my God, I've got to get the rest in the last third.
Yeah.
So all the bits that we want to read about, they've compressed in the last third. And you see it so many times in music books, fishing books. They spend the first half of the book talking about how they got into fishing. And we're going, we just want to read about Yateley and Burfield. And, you know, and all. You need to plan it out. So for me, I found that planning it out it's easy.
But you've never sort of, I don't know, you've never sort of looked for it. It's always been there. Those opportunities have organically come about, haven't they?
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah. No, I think they've always come about. Tim, obviously, with Carp World. Then I was editor of Crafty Carper. Obviously, the only time I've ever looked for it was when I wrote to Carp Fisher. And Angling Times came on and said, we'd like, carp fishing's kicking off. Could you do a weekly column? Yeah, I'm your man. Carp Talk. Yes, I'm your man. Big carp. Yeah, I've always been approached. I can't think I've ever sent stuff off and said, is this good enough? And that's not, there wasn't as many people doing it.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, surely somebody's going to cotton on that there's loads to write about carp fishing. And to be fair, I was one of the first people of my era to write instructive stuff. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Obviously, Cord came along and things like that afterwards. But from sort of the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s, I was probably one of the few that was doing the purely instructional, this is how to do it stuff. So, yeah, I stole a march on everybody, just because the way it was. It's the right place at the right time.
So, Jules, moving forward to sort of more modern times and the, I'm going to say it, death of print. What are your thoughts around the change that's happened with regards to writing and it becoming more and more digitalised, if at all present, a lot of video nowadays?
Well, it's the real world, isn't it? It's, it's reality. You can't, you can't push the genie back in the bottle. And the death of print, I think people think it's just carp fishing, but print is dying, not just because of the price of print, but it's a whole new world, isn't it? It's, you can make the best spod in the world, but SPOMs have overtaken them, so it doesn't matter how good your marker floats are now. If people aren't buying marker floats, it doesn't matter how good the potato is. People are buying boilies, and the world has moved on, and you have to move with it. It's no good saying it's not fair that print's died. My parents didn't have mobile phones, and when we had mobile phones, I'm sure my parents thought, well, why aren't people talking to each other? But that genie didn't get pushed back in the bottle. And I think with print, there's no point complaining. The reality is that people who've been brought up who are under the age of, say, 25 or 30, print wasn't a big thing for them. And so there's no good as saying, why aren't fishing magazines selling 30,000, a month? Because they'll be thinking, well, why would I buy a fishing magazine when I can get it all on my phone? That's what they want. What they want is not what we want. So what I want isn't on my phone. It's in an article written by Tim. It's in pictures by Gaz. It's not on a phone. For me, I've never read a book on a phone. Phones simply are little computers for me. I still have subscriptions to all the magazines. I still read magazines. But it brought it home to me a couple of weeks ago. When I worked at court at York and Leeds, I'd have to travel to Leeds. And, of course, on the way back, you walk past W.H. Smith's. And I would always treat myself to a magazine. And you would walk in and literally the length of the room was wall-to-wall magazines. And there would be 6 motorbike magazines. There would be 10 fishing magazines. There'd probably be 20 adult magazines. But, of course, I walked on by. I went with Roz a couple of weeks ago to sort out our engagement ring. And I went into W.H. Smith's and, literally, the magazines were 2 shelves, literally as wide as this room. There was nothing there. I think there was a copy of Course Fishing Monthly and Carpology. And I thought, well, maybe get a motorbike magazine. There was motorcycle news. It isn't just fishing where print is not seen as a medium. People want their news in different ways. So, yes, it is sad, but I'm lucky in that I had all those years of print. And you can't expect people who are young people to say, I want to read print. You have to give them it in a different way. Same as Kev can't sell what he used to sell 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago. He's had to move with the times. People want single rod sleeves. They don't all want rod bags. People want this kind of unhooking mat. They don't want that. And print is just part of the evolution of life.
And you definitely, considering you didn't necessarily need to, you've definitely taken that mantle on with regards to social media, mate. You're very active. We've done a number of lives and things together in the past, and always the feedback from everybody has been ultra positive, as with everything of yours on social media. And as you insinuated before, you're always constantly getting back to people, helping people, and giving back in that regard.
Yeah.
That have you found that easy?
Oh yeah, I have. Well, everybody has a shelf life. Everybody in carp fishing, profile-wise, has a shelf life. Don't care who you are. You have a shelf life. And I remember in the 90s, that was like, I was in everything, literally every magazine you could think of. And then, obviously, new people come along. People who are prepared to fish for this, fish for that, do this, do that, write in a certain way, have the editor come and photograph them, write the words for them, etc. And my fishing wasn't like that. This is what I do. So I ceased to be flavour of the month in the 2000s. I still fished just as much and probably caught more carp. And I remember in that era, it was forums, wasn't it? You used to have forums. Yeah. And I remember it wasn't really my kind of thing. I wasn't really into computers. The girls at work used to laugh because they used to call me the Filofax King. I've still got it now. And I always used to have everything produced on paper. It used to cost me boxes of chocolates, bottles of wine. Everything would be produced for me in paper when it really shouldn't have been. And occasionally my boss would say, what are these files? We're on digital. Oh, those are Julian's files. And they'd be like, oh. And I remember this forum was talking about fishing in the north, and it said, whatever happened to Julian Cundiff? And I thought, whatever happened to Julian Cundiff? I'm still here, and I was still catching, but because I wasn't in the magazines, because I wasn't, they were pretty dominated by cord and newer anglers, I wasn't the flavour of the month anymore, And I thought, oh, all right, yeah, whatever happened to Julian Cundiff? And I thought, yeah, whatever happened to Julian Cundiff? Lewis Porter, bless his cotton socks, gave me a job writing for Crafty Carp, a diary of an everyday carp angler, which was really one of the first day-to-day diaries where I did break it up 1st of June, 9th of June, 10th of June. And I covered everything that I would cover in social media now. And that was probably the most popular column I ever wrote. And I thought, do you know what? There is an avenue for people saying, you don't have to just go carp fishing. You actually could have a family, and you can write about your family, and you can write how that ties into your fishing. And I realised there was an avenue for me of a person who fished for normal sized carp, who did have a life outside fishing. And that column, I think, was probably one of their more popular columns because it was real world. And that's what led into short session success. And in effect, I reinvented myself. And then when social media came along, what a godsend that is in many ways, because when there wasn't social media, people would write to me. And I would say, I thought you're going to ask me this. I used to get on average 40 letters a week.
40 letters?
40 letters a week. And these aren't just 40 letters. These are 40 letters with, I'm fishing this water. Can you draw me a rig and a bait and stamp trace? And literally I would answer. And I realised that because when I went on holiday once to Tenerife, I came back and there was like 45 different letters waiting to be answered. And when social media came on, people don't write you the long, please tell me everything about fishing layer pits or three legs. They ask you a couple of questions. And social media is a great way because you can actually help people instantly, which is okay. But unfortunately, they then come back to you. And sometimes it's like a game of eternal ping pong. And no matter how you draw it to a close, you don't want to be rude to this person. But I found that social media is a great way to interact with people. I'm not one of these people who pays for followers. I'm not one of these people who follows people to get more likes and things like that. The only people I want following me are people who are interested in my fishing and want me to interact back with them. I'm not about saying to Kev, by the way, Kev, I've got 30,000 on Instagram. How about a 10% pay raise? Doesn't interest me whatsoever. I want people to follow me if they want to follow me because they're interested and it can help them, not because I'm going to do them a carp fishing competition or something. So for me, I love social media because I do interact with people, and you interact with people and you can make a difference. I think you can just say to somebody, use that hook, try that, think about that. You're doing that wrong. And you can change people's fishing lives instantly. And at the end of the day, catching lots of carp yourself is great. But if you can change other people's lives or people's fishing lives, and I don't want to make it sound dramatic, but when I fish with Andy Little and people like that, they changed my fishing life by saying, Jules, you need to tie that knot properly, and you need to use a 12, not an 8, and you need to cut that dental floss in half, and you need to... And I realised that actually just these little things make the big picture. And I realised that most people, it's just little things. They just want that little bit of push in the right way and help. And that can make a difference to their lives, their fishing lives, not over dramatic. And isn't that great that you can put smiles on faces rather than pounds in pockets? I mean, we all have to earn money to live, but I would like to think that you've influenced so many people and they go, wow, yeah, they might not be influenced now, but that you helped them all those years ago. I mean, that to me is, Nash's legacy and Fox's legacy and all that. That's what they're. But my legacy, I think, yeah, people will remember what carp have caught, but I would think people think, oh, yeah, I remember when I read Practical Carp Fishing or Short Session Success, or I saw that YouTube video, or that to me is what social media is. It's a great interactor.
Here's a question for you, and a big one. Why are we not seeing you on video productions now, mate? Apart from this one, obviously.
Yeah.
This is a podcast.
Carp fishing has never been a job to me.
Yeah.
The way I approach any obligations I do is I always do it professionally. So me and you went to the same hairstylist, tanning salon this morning.
Too right.
Too right, yeah,
You know
yeah,
this.
the same rub down. Yeah. So no, I've always done whatever I can as professionally as I can. So although it's not a job, I treat it like a job, but it can't ever stray to being a job. So I am, and the people laugh about this, I'm the most antisocial social angler. So when I go carp fishing, you'll hardly ever see pictures of me fishing with other people. Very, very rare. I go fishing on my own. It's just me, the carp, and my fishing. I don't want to surround. I don't have socials, and that's no disrespect because it's a different world. I'm not into socials, fishing with mates, maybe in winter now and again. So if I don't want to fish with people, and that's not because I don't like them, it's just because it's me. That's what I do.
That's what your fishing is.
That's what my fishing is to me. So the thought of a camera crew coming down and filming me and reshoot that and whatever, I don't want to do it. It's just not me. I haven't got a problem with somebody coming down and watching me fishing, but the thought of having to do stuff to camera and having to catch this and do this, it isn't for me. It's just not me. And I love the stuff that Alan does, and I love, I see the stuff Sipography does. The stuff that Sipography produced, Rich and Elliot, and the stuff they do with Jim, it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah,
but
brilliant.
it is hard work. And carp, my fishing is so precious to me that when I'm on that bank, it's not work. I might do the odd picture now and again. I might answer the odd text, but when I'm fishing, I'm fishing. When I'm bike riding, I'm bike riding. When I'm with Roz, I'm with Roz. And I've never let that side of it creep into my. And I did the videos. I mean, obviously, I did the practical carp fishing videos all those years ago. No script, one cameraman, one sound lady, no script, 1, 2, 3, and I love doing that. But even then, it felt like it was sort of interrupting my fishing.
Yeah,
I didn't do anything I wouldn't do normally fishing, but I didn't feel at one with my fishing, and I have to do that. My fishing, I've always said, has to be when I want it to be, where I want it to be, who I want it to be, and free.
It's almost a bit like that moment you said you had when you caught 44 fish or 44 20s.
45 20s, yeah.
It becomes a sort of a cut-off, doesn't it? When you feel that spill over, that's fair. That's fair.
I'd love to sit with somebody and do, I've done them when you do, we run through time, the multi-rig, stuff like that. I wouldn't even mind having somebody on the shoulder just videoing me, but it doesn't work like that. They don't just come and just video you. You need to stand, and the mic needs resetting, and the sun's not in the right place. And that's why it's not for me. It's not my job. And, there are very few, Terry doesn't like it.
No.
Terry doesn't do it. Terry does the odd films, I think, as an obligation. I don't think Terry wakes up in the morning and goes, great, I'm going filming. I'm not Terry in any way, but I am a carp fisherman, and this side of it is another. I'm very professional about it, but I'm a fisherman at first, and the rest of it is just an incidental that I've maybe able to leave some kind of legacy.
You definitely left that. For you now, looking sort of forward, what keeps you motivated to go out there and catch fish? You still have the same passion, but you're catching. Let's say you catch, I don't know, how many the course of the year? 300 fish, 100 fish, 200 fish, whatever it may be.
I would say probably 500 carp a year.
500 carp a year. What keeps the motivation levels up throughout the course of that time?
Enjoying it. It's what gets you out of bed in the morning. I could not get out and ride a bike 60 miles unless I enjoy it, because there's very little feedback. So when I go carp fishing, I go carp fishing because I enjoy it. It's not about pennies. It's not about pounds. It's not about kudos. It's not about getting a better deal. It's not about I'll be remembered. I go because I'm as equally passionate about it now as I was that 23-year-old lad first carp fishing. It's still, of course, it's not as exciting because you've sort of understood stuff. It's exciting in a different way. But I am still, when that buzzer goes, it's, I might have caught 10 there yesterday. The buzzer goes again. It's like, whoa. I'm still as passionate. Because I'm at one with it, it gets me out of bed. And I think the hardest thing is, and a lot of people have given up fishing because they said, I woke up one morning and thought, I just don't want to do this anymore. And I've always been very careful in life, only to do the things I want to do. So my music, all the bands I liked in 70s and 80s, I still like them. I don't go, oh, I sort of pretended I was into drums and bass, but I just don't like it anymore. Or I sort of pretended I was into this, or I sort of like got into that because it seemed trendy, but I don't want to do it anymore. Every interest that I've ever had, I've not left behind because I've only done it because I really did enjoy it. You know, the motocross, the F1, the bodybuild, all that kind of stuff. I loved it and I still love it. And it's got to be fitted in.
Love that. Just true to yourself, ain't you?
Yeah.
No thoughts or inklings to do any sort of European travel fishing or anything like that? Or are you happy just...
If I lived abroad, I fish abroad a lot. Life's too short, mate, for me. And I do everything. I look at these guys that go to Cassian and the road trips, the Eurobanks are fantastic. But I'm just happy catching the fish I do locally. Coming down here, catch a few, going to Lincolnshire, go with Brian. I've fished Drayton. We've had a bit of fun in the winter, catch him in the snow. I just enjoy carp fishing. I just enjoy it, and it's just knowing when. I think Chris Ball once said, the reason he's still carp fishing, and he still is carp fishing, is never to kick the arse out of it. And I think that's a really good expression. I've never known to kick the arse out of bike riding. I'll go every day, and then all of a sudden you blow out. I'll go to 7 concerts on this tour, and you get to the 8th concert. It's just having that ability not to kick the you-know-what out of it. And if I lived abroad, I would fish abroad. But I don't, I probably will, when we go to Tenerife, I probably will go and, fish with the Beecham's, Gran Canaria, just have a couple of days out there. And I just love that, I'd love to do that. But life's too short at the moment to do that for me.
Yeah, I do. I like that, mate. I like that outlook. Your mindset is, it's brilliant. It's fantastic. It is successful. I'll have to scratch off the cycling Tour de France road trip idea we had for a video because you don't want to be on camera. You don't want to go on fishing. I'm joking.
I don't mind that. Yeah, that's actually because all you're doing is pedaling. But I don't mind that. But it's when you got now. Can you just go back down that hill and can you redo that hill again? It's like no.
Do that stage again?
No, that stage again. No. I've got enough EPO, evening primrose. Is it evening primrose oil or something?
Yes.
It made no difference to my cycling whatsoever.
I think you might have the wrong EPO.
All right. Damn, I thought it wasn't working.
Yeah. Probably see the Olympic Committee on that.
Yeah.
Mate, it's been a fantastic sort of whistle-stop tour through everything, and we'll definitely get you back in and talk about a few stuff in the future, mate. I found it thoroughly enjoyable and fascinating, to be fair. And despite your humble nature and you not taking it, you've been a massive influence even on me and my angling growing up through carp fishing, but also just you standing the test of time, and you're still relevant now, mate. If you did a film or a video, if anybody could ever twist your arm, not that they needed to or you need to, it would be mega successful. But the stuff
I'm
you do
actually writing another book,
Here we go. Another book?
Yeah, one of the books, everybody writes his books. They go, well, I woke up and I did this and I caught this and they do become sort of a samey because they are samey. And I read a book about 6 years ago by a guy called Nicky Six, who is the bassist in Motley Crue. And his book was called The Heroin Diaries. Now, this is an exclusive. I'm not going to reveal anything that you're going to, oh, my God. This is a
Heroin Diaries.
Heroin Diaries.
EPO to heroin.
He wrote this book called The Heroin Diaries, which was about 18 months of his life on tour. He wrote it from his perspective, and then he got 30 other people to write it from their perspective, how they found him at the time. This is how he viewed it, but how did his tour manager view that gig? How did his girlfriend? And what I've done, and I've done probably 180,000 words now, is I've written a life story based around my life in carp fishing, the lesson, but pretty much like this podcast, which covers, because my life is based around carp fishing, though, so obviously you pay, everything's been, my carp fishing's been based around life, or is it life based around my carp fishing? And what I've done, I've got probably 15 people now who've written about their perspectives of me at the time, and quite a lot of it's quite rightly unflattering when you look back. So when I was doing about the 45-20s, it's like, there's one guy who was there at the same time, and he wrote about it and said, all he would do is he'd talk about himself and his fish. So, it gives you that reality perspective, and I will get Tim to do a bit, and I've got one of the members of my family to do it. And in effect, it'll be 30 other people's perspective on my fishing. So and they don't know what I wrote either, so they have to write it from their perspective. So they don't read mine and think, well, I'll base that around that. I've asked them to write, and they have covered.
I like that. Yeah, like a rotary letter, isn't it?
Like a rotary letter, but it covers the certain periods. It's about 500 words they've written each. But it's like, gives her like a view of how they viewed me at the time, which often wasn't complimentary. When you look back on yourself, you think, wow, I could have been a bit nicer to that person, or wow, I was a bit harsh there, and wow, I stitched him a bit, or what. And none of them have been nasty about me, but you actually view it from them and think, do you know what? If I'd been you, that's actually probably how I viewed it. And, you know, when I was a kid growing up, it was like, who's this Julian writing in Carp Fish? He's the biggest carp he's ever caught is 1912. So I've got one of the guys from back then who wrote about how farcical it was, and they used to laugh about it and things like that. Here he is, he thinks he's the next Kevin Maddocks. He can't even grow a moustache. Because I used to wear the KM jumpers, but I could not grow the moustache. And it's quite interesting because it gives you a different... So that's a book that will probably come out in 2022, 2023. So 2022 maybe.
I look forward to that.
Yeah. It's not called The Heroin Diaries, by the way.
No, it's a bit much darker.
No, it's got a much better title that nobody ever's used that has got the word carp partly in it.
Nice. I very much look forward to that, mate. Thanks for the little
that's an exclusive.
I love that. Before you go, obviously there is the quick fire questions. I've been quite easy on you here, mate. I've been all right. Rock star or angling star?
Rock star. I want to be Adrian Smith. Adrian Smith. No, not only is he a rock star, he is also an angling star. So yeah, rock star. Yeah.
They're pretty much the same thing, aren't they, mate?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, those. Well, you probably earn more now in fishing than you earn in a mid-level rock group because there ain't no royalties from records now.
Yeah, it's a bit different landscape, isn't it?
A bit different.
Fishing 20 years ago or fishing 20 years in the future?
20 years ago, because I had fishing 20 years ago. So what's 20? 2001, it wasn't.
It's not that long ago.
It wasn't even. It's not even old school.
Well, I can't really say it's not that long ago. It's 20 years ago, but you know what I mean in terms of dates.
It isn't that long ago. So yeah, even fishing 40 years, I'd take fishing in 1980 rather than fishing in 5 years' time. Honestly, not that there's anything wrong.
3 anglers to share a social with. See,
they've got to be people who are alive, and they've got to be people who would enjoy a social. So I've thought about this, and I'm glad you told me this one. So the first person would be Kevin Maddocks. Although he's not a fisherman anymore, I would love to chat, and I spent time with Kevin. I'd love to chat to him about how he views how things have gone on and how it went on in the past. So Kevin is he's one of those people who can eat for England. He can out-eat anybody, and you would never think so. He's the biggest eater. He can literally eat anybody at the table. So Kevin would be one. Tommy Bridewell, British Superbikes carp angler. He loves his carp angling, his British Superbikes. I met him a couple of times at races. Really good bloke, and I'd love to talk to him about his racing as well. And Adrian Smith, of course, you know... I don't want 3 people to sit and talk to me about how many 20s, 30s and 40s they've got. I want somebody to talk to me about British Superbakes. I want somebody to talk about the history of the hair rig. And I want somebody to talk about carp fishing. So that would be the ideal social.
Nice. Where would you have it? Up north somewhere?
I'd probably, do you know what? I might have it round at Adrian Smith's.
Yeah.
Have the boat that brings us around it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Or maybe no, Church Lake.
You can have it on Church. You can do that.
Yeah, Church Lake.
One thing you'd remove from carp fishing?
Snobbery. Absolutely detest snobbery in carp fishing. It first happened when I caught all those 20s and somebody said, yeah, but they're not Yateley 20s, are they? And then I caught a 30 and somebody said, yeah, but it's from a water you fish all the time. So whatever you do, somebody will always find a snobbery. And now the worst form of snobbery is, yeah, but it's not like it was in the 80s and 90s. It's like... carp fishing was better then than it is now. What makes me laugh is that these guys are fishing waters that are modern waters, using modern gear, using modern lines, modern hooks, modern baits, benefiting from the modern world. And yet they say, I wish it was like it was years ago. What, years ago when you were complaining that your brolly leak, people are looking at it through rose-coloured glasses. And I just don't like all this, because you weren't born in 1977 or not fishing in 1982, it's not right. Norton Disney, Linear, all those places cater to a certain kind of carp angler. And the same people who moan about it, just think about it, in the 80s, when I was fishing in the 80s, I'm sure carp anglers in the 60s and 70s looked at me and thought, who the hell does he think he is with his green jumper on, his matching rods? He's got a swim that's got a name to it. He's fishing for fish with names. That's not carp fishing. Carp fishing was better 20 years ago. And I think every time I want to say, it was better then, I think, I'll look like one of those silly old men. It's the Victor Meldrew syndrome. Just bury yourself up to your caps, lads, and stop moaning and be thankful. Sorry, that's my whinge.
I like that. Soapbox was good there.
Yeah.
You can never use your claw rig again. What rig do you go to?
I do stiff hinged.
Oh, nice.
Hinged, yeah.
Boilies only, or never use a boilie again?
Boilies only, because you can chop them, crumb them, flake them. Yeah, boilies only.
Drum and bass or country and western?
Country and western, because country and western, in many ways, is soft rock. You know, it is soft rock. If you listen to Shania Twain, that's country and western. Her husband, Mutt Lange. Mutt Lange produced Foreigner, Def Leppard, those kind of bands. So you hear a lot of country and you think, wow, that's like a soft rock. And you hear a lot of rock and think, that's like a heavy country. So country and western and Dolly Parton.
Yeah.
She doesn't need to sing.
In the edge or out in the middle of the pond?
In the edge every time. Always in the edge.
Last question, mate. Night in with the missus or night out on the bank?
Oh, it's got to be a night in with the missus, purely simply because I've had, after I haven't been fishing since 1976. So what's 24 and 20? So that's 46 years of fishing. Yeah. I don't think I can deny my good lady a night at home. And also, and I wanted to just add this, how many times have we thought southwesterly, good conditions, rain, and we sat there and nothing's happened? And we've sat there and it's been crap conditions, high pressure, nothing happening, and the rod's roared off. And I thought, for every time it's been cock on and it's not happened, there's been times when it shouldn't have happened and it did. So always a night in with the missus, as long as she's not got Coronation Street, EastEnders, or Say Yes to the Dress on. Anything else I'll take, darling.
Dress.
Say, oh, she loves that.
What is that?
Yeah. I think it's just gone past the Kardashians. Anything else, darling, I'll accept.
Sort of wizardry is on the telly now, mate. Jules, you've been an absolute superstar, mate. Thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching and listening. You may, those observant amongst you, have seen that our podcasts are still weekly. Don't panic. Not weekly, always on YouTube. They will be weekly, definitely on Spotify, iTunes, and your preferred podcast platforms. But in terms of the YouTube versions, they'll be interspersed, so look out for them. But they are still weekly. Jules, thank you very much, mate.
Absolutely my pleasure.
And we'll have to do it again.
Yeah, anytime. Say yes to the dress.
Cheers, mate.